Welcome, everybody, to the PWZ podcast. This is, of course, Rick Del Santo, and joining me today, I have Austin Boyer of Wrestling World Podcast. How's it going?
I'm doing great, Rick. How are you, man?
I'm doing really good. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. We're going to be talking about some professional wrestling, my favorite sport, of course. So, and as you, I assume at least, you do a podcast about it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So why don't you, before we get going about any topics, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the podcast?
Well, I host a podcast called Wrestling World. I cover all topics of wrestling from AEW to WWE to a little bit of Ring of Honor. I also cover some boxing and MMA. I'll actually be doing a boxing episode next week, so be sure to check it out. You can follow my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you stream your podcast. So definitely be on the lookout.
When did you start watching wrestling?
I want to say when I was about 2 or 3 years old.
Okay.
I'm 26.
How long ago?
So.
20. Okay. All right. So that wasn't that long ago. Well, at least for me, it wasn't that long ago.
A couple of decades, but I mean.
Yeah. What struck you about professional wrestling? That's something I always like to find out. What got you interested in it, and of course, what got you interested in doing your podcast? I'm a regular listener, and I enjoy it. So it's kind of fun to listen to. So I always like to know what struck people about getting involved in professional wrestling, especially podcasting.
Well, what first got me involved in the wrestling, when I fell in love with it, man, was the storytelling. I'm a sucker for a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So from the get-go, when I was real young, the storytelling, of course, I grew up in the Ruthless Aggression era too. So that was definitely a big role in my childhood. So that was definitely something that I was a kid, man. The storytelling, the characters, you got Taker, John Cena, all those guys. And I just fell in love with it at a young age, and I haven't stopped. Now, what got me into podcasting was actually funny is, I never thought about doing a podcast. And then just a couple of years ago, I started listening to Jim Cornette. And I'm a big Jim Cornette fan.
Same here.
So I thought, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could give my thoughts on wrestling and share, some of my opinions, and see what other people think. So about a year ago, I started the Wrestling World podcast, and we went from there, man. And I'm now at 5,000 total plays. So we're doing pretty well.
That's good. You struck, of course, you mentioned Jim Cornette, which a lot of modern fans dislike. I've been a fan of Jim's since the 1980s. I've been following professional wrestling for close to 40 years. So, while he was in his prime was when I was getting into professional wrestling. And he's somebody that always stuck out with me from his time managing the Midnight Express to, his time in Memphis or the NWA, WCW, and of course owning Smoky Mountain. And then, of course, his brief run through the World Wrestling Federation.
Right.
Of course, I agree with probably 99% of the things that he says on his podcast. And most fans today do not. And they'd like to take to the internet to bash him. And just what's your opinion of that? I think that he's probably still to this day makes 100% sense as far as what wrestling should be.
Right. I definitely agree, man. You got to think back too. Jim is from a different era than we are, than most people of wrestling fans are today. So he's from a better era where wrestling, meant something, where characters didn't break character, where the heels were the heels and the baby faces were the baby faces. The baby faces today aren't really don't really stick out as much as they did back then.
Right.
So a lot of people, they hate Jim Cornette, but it's a different era.
I fully agree. I get it. I don't always agree with his opinions on certain wrestlers. I agree maybe with the certain eras of their careers that maybe, he loves to bash Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
I like Kenny Omega, but there are certain parts of his career that I will never, ever watch that obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with the eras I'm talking about, maybe wrestling a blow-up doll or a 9-year-old girl, that stuff to me. When I think of professional wrestling, I like to turn to the 1980s, because that was my favorite era. That's the era that I grew up in. I'm a huge NWA fan, even the modern NWA, because it's more realistic and more like the professional wrestling that I grew up with.
Right.
So,
I
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And Kenny Omega, like you said, a lot of his earlier stuff, I wouldn't watch either. His stuff he's doing at AEW, he's a heel. I think it was pretty good, and I think a lot of people should watch it. But I agree with you. I definitely wouldn't watch any of his older stuff. The blow up doll,
Yeah.
that was pretty bad. But
it's just ridiculous. I mean, I'll watch that match that he had with Danielson, for instance, like the crowd. Obviously, they were both. I mean, it's Danielson. Danielson, in my eyes, can really do no wrong. So, he's probably the best wrestler of the last 20 years. But that match, like, they had the crowd in the palm of their hands throughout the entire thing. You know what I mean? It was just insanely great. And I just watched that full hour with an entire smile on my face because of the reaction. That's what wrestling to me should be. Little is more. Your more is less, rather. That's in a lot of wrestling today. They just seem to overdo it. You get what I'm saying?
I agree.
Yeah. So tell me about let's see. You recently did a podcast on the New Day, and this struck me as very interesting because you're like, should they split up? That was basically the theme, and you gave some good points.
Yes.
Each one should have the singles push. That's the first one I want to get into.
Yes.
The first topic. So, obviously, the two of the gentlemen did have a singles push. Two of them were pretty successful, I'd have to say. Big E, obviously, he's out with an injured neck. We can talk about his career and whether he's going to come back pretty soon. We'll have to see. But Kofi, I think, was a failed experiment in a way. I thought that it's not that he didn't live up to his full potential. I thought that he was doing everything right. I think that, they had to have a larger than life character and Brock Lesnar come in and destroy him because they were making the very important Fox deal. So they needed somebody of Brock's magnitude. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I honestly feel like it seems like their go-to is Brock.
Yes.
Whenever their back is up, whenever their back is against the wall, it's okay. Let's bring in Brock. The last thing we need is a part-time champion. Yes, Brock is good, but honestly, at that time, I think it was Kofi. It should have been Kofi's time. He should have had a longer run. That's just my opinion, but
I feel like he should have gone through a longer run as well. I was at the Mania that he won the title, and the crowd was completely insane for that moment. And the build-up for it was perfect, I thought. Yeah. It was just they did everything right, It just seemed like it was like one of those things that organically happened. Like they did not expect it to happen, and then the crowd each and every week is just getting more and more insane for this to happen. And finally put the belt on him. And like you said, they did not give him enough of a chance, I think.
I didn't think so at all. Even the match was like 5 minutes long. I mean, come on. If you're going to have a match like that, at least it's a good match.
Was it even 5 minutes long? I mean, I think
maybe 2 minutes at the most.
I know the bell rang, and then next thing you know, the whole thing was over. It was ringing again. I mean, I don't think it was fair for Kofi, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But as far as like the whole part-time champion thing goes, this is my opinion. This is back in the day when I was a kid, Hogan was the champion, basically. He was not on TV each and every week. He was barely at house shows. He had like the relaxed schedule, as you would think. So it's probably not as part-time as Brock Lesnar or rather his schedule, because Brock makes 12 appearances a year. Yeah. Hogan would probably, do some, obviously the pay-per-views, obviously, but at that time there was only 4 pay-per-views a year as opposed to 1 each month, or, so basically what I'm comparing is that there's not much of a difference It's just that I think it's more noticeable now for some strange reason because there was a lot more Hogan merchandise and he was out there way more in commercials and all that other stuff back in the day.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. You know, my opinion though.
I get you what you're saying. Like I know a lot of people say it. A lot of people are not a fan of Brock because they might be a fan of him, but they might not be a fan that he's a part timer.
It's like I was gonna say, like it's not like I'm not a fan of him because I am. He's good. He's good in the ring. You know, a great MMA career, solid wrestling background, but just a part time. And you know, it's I don't know. I'm just not a fan of that.
I'd like to see him more as well, but in my personal opinion is that it makes something. It makes the event that he's there defending the title or such things. It just makes it a little bit more special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That he's not there as much. And that's the thing that I do like about it. Would I like to see him more? Yeah, I'd like to see him at least a few more times a month, maybe 2 out of the 3 times. He'll show up a month and then not show up for 3. You know what I mean? And then it's kind of disappointing, you know, in a way.
Yeah, because you know it seems like they'll just throw him on. There's no buildup. You know, he comes out of nowhere. You get a match maybe in 2 weeks. Where's the buildup? There's no.
Yeah, and then there's just and then he comes in, destroys whatever, and then well, as of late, he's just lost to Roman each time, which is I don't know. Before we get back to the New Day thing, how do you feel about the SummerSlam match between Brock and Roman?
You know, I said this on my podcast with Mr. Richardson. You know, they can up the ante all they want. It's a last man standing match. Okay, it's cool. I don't care if it's a buried alive match. I don't care if it's a casket match. I don't want to see this. This is like the 5 time. Now, if the payoff isn't Lesnar wins, then this is pointless because we've been here before. But with the rumor going around that Roman is supposed to be taking time off, from what I'm hearing, we could get, you know, Brock as a champion, but there is also that there is something that could happen. You know, Austin Theory carrying the Money in the Bank briefcase, we could get a cash in sooner rather than later. I don't know, but I mean,
I discussed this last night on our podcast, and me and my co-host Marcel were discussing this. And I think we pretty much both agreed that while there's a very good chance it could happen, because obviously a cash-in can happen at any damn time, that there's a chance that might not even be in the works. Like it's not even there. But and the other thing about that is like Brock and Roman, like you said, Roman's won every time pretty much, at least in the last, 2 years?
I believe so. I mean, I don't remember the last time Brock won, except a couple years ago at WrestleMania.
Yeah, and that was not for, that was, I don't think Roman was champion, right? That was just a match.
Maybe Brock was champion. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Again, they've had so many matches, so it's like
it's hard to keep up.
Yeah.
With everything. I'm kind of interested. I am intrigued with this match, but like you said, if Brock doesn't win, then what are we here for? Because we've seen it all before.
To be honest, I wasn't too thrilled with their match at WrestleMania either.
No,
I wasn't.
I mean, that was actually one of the matches I thought that WrestleMania this year. Well, night 1 I thought was like a perfect wrestling show. I thoroughly enjoyed the first night of WrestleMania. The second night, I could barely sit through, to be honest with you. I was I wanted to shut it off after the second, into the match. I thought the first night was like perfect. It was beginning to end, really great show. But I would like to see. I don't know. I guess I'd like to see Brock win. But I have a feeling that, according to what the plan is with WWE and Roman, that they don't want to take that title off of him, that they want to continue, and they want to have him beat Bruno's or Hogan's record as far as holding it as champion.
Well, if that's the plan, man, I'm going to be watching WWE for a while. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Roman. I like him as a heel, great heel. but this has gone for for a year, of him being champion, and now
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, I know.
It's getting too predictable. It's like every time he comes out there, we know he's going to win. We know what's going to happen.
And there's nobody for him to face either outside of Brock Lesnar right now, because that's another topic that we've discussed endlessly on our podcast is that who's going to beat him? There's nobody in there. If Theory cashes in, how the hell is that going to happen? He's got to be beaten and bloodied to a pulp, basically. You get what I'm saying? He's got to be destroyed.
Yeah,
because there's no.
Realistically, it doesn't make sense, unless
Right.
Theory pulls a Seth Rollins and gets involved in the match between Brock and Roman and cashes in the last minute during the match.
I could see that happening. I could see that happening.
That's the only way I could see it happening. Now, honestly, if it were up to me and I was booking Money in the Bank, I would have had Seth Rollins go in and take the briefcase. That would have been better than having Theory, which doesn't really, I don't know.
It looks like they have a lot of big plans for Theory. I like Austin Theory. I think he is going to be a huge star, but when you're putting him up against Roman or Brock, he's puny. How is he going to be able to? He's these two guys that have dominated professional wrestling, or WWE for the last 5 years or more.
Yeah, I definitely think it's too soon. I get their push. I get they want to push him. Yeah, he's a good talent. I like him too. At first, I wasn't too big on Theory. I thought, why are they pushing this guy? They're comparing him to Cena, but he's kind of grown on me. So I'm for it. I'm for a push, but just not for the title. Maybe the United States title, maybe even the Intercontinental Championship at one point, but not the world title. Not now, at least.
I don't think it should happen for another year. But if they're going to do it a certain way, obviously they're doing it through Money in the Bank would probably make the most sense. But it's how are they going to do it? That's the big question. Because it's got to be, he can't, like I said, he can't go in there and destroy somebody that's destroyed every single person they've set in front of him, like Brock, who's just a beast. Roman, who's just been dominating for well over a year. It just doesn't make sense. Actually, 2 years he's been dominating. So they can't just have this guy that's completely small. And each and every week they kind of somewhat, even though they're supposed to be giving Theory a push, they kind of make an ass out of him at the same time and putting him in ridiculous stipulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really doing anything for Theory. It's just, I don't understand it. I mean, they had other options beside Theory. They could have put Lashley in there. Like I said, they could have did Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
I don't get it. My picks to win the Money in the Bank were actually Becky Lynch in the women's division and Seth Rollins in the men's division. That didn't happen, but
I picked Theory because I just had a feeling that was going to happen. I don't remember who won the woman. Oh, Liv Morgan. That's right.
Liv Morgan.
Yeah, that's right. Because she cashed in. I did not. Actually, I didn't even care because I was not very interested outside of that match outside of Asuka. So, who I completely enjoy watching in the wrestle. That was really the only person I cared about in that match. I didn't care to watch anybody else. So let's get back into a little bit of the New Day that I want to ask you about. They're a comedy act. I don't see, a lot of comedy acts don't turn into, say, headlining acts, but two of these guys kind of broke away. Big E and Kofi. Kofi obviously wasn't. You also pointed out that your podcast that Kofi did not come in as a comedy wrestler. He came in as a gimmick, and he was Jamaican. There was something to that effect at the time, I believe, right?
Jamaican. He debuted in ECW, I believe, when they rebooted ECW.
Yeah. As much as I like Xavier Woods, I think he's a fantastic wrestler. I just don't ever think that, he would be fit into that headlining factor. Similar to Big E and Kofi. I'm not sure what your opinion is. I mean, both Big E and Kofi have held the two most important titles in that company, the WWE titles. So where would you see Xavier Woods if he was to get a gigantic push of some sort? I don't see him going in that direction, though. That's personal opinion.
question. I don't see him going in that direction either. I see him maybe going for the Intercontinental Championship, maybe the United States Championship. I hope they don't demote him and put him down at the 24/7 championship and anything can happen. They did it to Jeff Hardy. I mean, they do it to anybody.
I mean, look at the Akira Tozawa every week, in the background going for that. And that guy's a serious wrestler. I enjoyed him when he was on 205 Live and NXT. And then they just have him out here getting married and kissing Tamina and all that other crap. It's just
The cruiserweight division was something. They took that out, and now they 7 championship, and they got all these wrestlers they could be pushing, chasing after this title that means absolutely nothing to nobody. But
nobody cares about it. Not even sure why they continue it. Like you said, it means absolutely nothing. The only people it does mean anything to is the USA Network, are the ones that kind of gave them the idea to have that. So it's complete garbage, in my opinion. Yeah. So, and
if that happens to Xavier Woods, I mean, I could see it happening unless they can give him maybe a decent push, but I just don't see it for the world title.
My other thing is, you mentioned the cruiserweight division. It's a sad state of affairs that last year they decided to get rid of it, and they took the title and put it. It was Roderick Strong, right? Correct? That had it at the time.
I haven't been keeping up with 205 Live, but I think you're right. I think it was
actually 205 Live got canceled. So it was 205 Live, and then it basically was a lesser version of NXT. And it got replaced with NXT Level Up, which is a 30-minute version of NXT, which is supposed to replace 205 Live. So the Cruiserweight title got merged with the North American Championship. I believe it was Roderick Strong and Carmelo Hayes. So the fact that they just completely ignored and just destroyed the 205 Live brand that I thought had a lot of potential. They never put their heart and soul into that television program that they could have made that a gigantic show to watch. It was just probably like watching Sunday Night Heat or Saturday Morning Slam or some other crap show that they did.
Yeah. They had something going, They had Cedric Alexander, Rick Swann at the time when it first came about. They had all these names that they could have that you see now chasing after the 24/7 championship or just backstage in a segment or something. But
if any of these guys are still employed, a lot of people from that division were just let go during that mass layoff last year. A lot of them turned up in Impact or AEW. Look at Tony Nese is over there in AEW now. I think Daivari has made some NWA appearances. It's just kind of crazy that, like I said, it was such a great show to watch. It was exciting, and then they just did away with it. That was it. It was like the B show for NXT after a while, and then they just canceled and made it like a half-hour, NXT Level Up, which is probably the worst of the shows that they've done in years, to be honest. Yeah. It's on the network. I don't know if you've seen it. I had the pleasure of watching it ever, but it's not that interesting.
I probably won't watch it then. I mean, there's a lot nowadays that get my attention with WWE. Not a lot of good things. Not a lot of things that stand out to me. I like AEW. I'm an AEW fan.
I didn't get the chance to watch tonight's AEW. I did get home in time. I work Wednesday nights normally. I usually get home right like in the middle of it. And I did catch the barbed wire match. Why don't you talk about that? What did you think of that match? I thought it was pretty gruesome.
Bloodbath. Well, Chris Jericho, anyway. But that was expected, with this pain gimmick, and obviously, with Eddie Kingston being how he is, his character, you knew it was going to be something special.
Yeah.
And with AEW, you got to give credit to them because they're putting on 5-star shows every week with the main events. We saw the Blood and Guts pay-per-view. We saw, whatever.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing this match. So it's like every week we're seeing something new that's keeping our attention, which is something that WWE really can't keep up with or even do because of their PG rating or whatever. But
it's hard for me to sit through a 3-hour broadcast of Monday Night Raw or even a 2-hour SmackDown. I can't remember the last time I watched SmackDown, to be honest with you. I try. And it's usually right during the opening segment. That's when I shut it off. It's like if I'm not tuned in the first 2 or 3 minutes, like mentally, I usually just shut it off.
yeah, it's been a long time since I sat through SmackDown myself. Now I will sit through Raw depending on the lineup they have for like a week. But there's so many segments. They fill their show with 20-minute promos in the beginning.
Mhm.
A ton of backstage segments that, like the 24/7 segments we've been talking about. Just nonsense, it's I don't
And
know.
it's 3 hours, so you have to sit through all that stuff for 3 hours. And mind you, they didn't add any extra matches during that 3-hour period. There's still the same amount of matches. There's just more BS in between, all the backstage segments, all the interviews, stuff that's just does not need to be done.
And that's time they could be using to put over guys, to put guys that haven't been on TV on TV.
Mhm.
And with AEW, man, you see people on TV, different people all the time, not just the same people, and they're not even on for 3 hours.
Right. I think they have 3 hours of TV each week between Dynamite and Rampage. I'm not counting the YouTube shows, but
Right. Dark AEW Dark, but
yeah.
You would think that WWE would step their game up a little bit. You would think that things would change. Of course, you have your top stars like Roman and Brock and Drew McIntyre and all these guys, but I don't know, man. It's just
it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
To think about, because there's so much potential. WWE had an incredible, they still have a decent roster, but they had an incredible roster before they let all those guys go. But with AEW, there's so many guys. Now, mind you, they can't bring everybody in that gets fired from WWE. They can't bring every independent star in that has a buzz. But they, and I'm not the world's biggest AEW fan. Do I watch it every week? Yes, I enjoy it for the most part. You know what I mean? I feel, like I said, I've been watching wrestling for close to 40 years. I'm going to pick through the show sometimes and say what's not charming or pleasing to the eyes for a wrestling fan. They do a lot of backstage segments that sometimes just don't need to be done, but they put the quality work into like the matches.
Yeah. I actually got into it with a guy on Twitter. They were doing it. And it was we were having a discussion between WWE and AEW. And I had got on there and said AEW is better because of their matches and their storylines. Now their storylines, they're okay, but they're much better than what we're seeing with WWE nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
One guy commented on there and he said, well, if you like the matches, then why don't you go watch AEW, quit watching WWE? And I said, he said, if you want entertainment, then why don't you just watch AEW? And I says, well, if 90% of the show in WWE is supposed to be the entertainment, then why, and we're getting nonsense of backstage segments and all this other stuff, then why do we watch it?
Right.
And I got out of that Twitter space, but
you don't get too sucked into wrestling Twitter. It could be, I just now at this point in my life, I've just learned to not argue with people on Twitter over wrestling because it's never satisfying, and it always ends up just ridiculous, and people will insult you, make memes of you, and all that other crap. So I just don't even bother.
Yeah, I felt like the biggest heel that day, but you know what? It is what it is.
But not for nothing, I watch pretty much anything that's professional wrestling. I watch local indie stuff as well, and it's just there's nothing wrong with liking both companies. There's really not.
Right.
It's okay to like both companies. Are you going to like everything on either show? Probably not, So, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. You know, there's things I like about WWE. There's not some things I like about WWE, but I still watch it. Um,
One of the things that I see on WWE is that it's just the same people each and every week. They had all these guys like, and I think you mentioned this just a few seconds ago, that they had all these guys. You know what I mean? They could have done that and made it more of a variety. They have all these guys sitting in NXT at one point that they could have mixed it up a bit. Instead, each week you're going to see Drew in a segment. You're going to see Roman in a segment. The Usos and Street Profits you've seen 9,000 times. Now, I can't tell you that at SummerSlam that I'm looking forward to that match because I've already seen it.
right.
So
That's the problem. You know, like I said, I like WWE, but they're struggling because they're repetitive. We see the same thing every week. To where in AEW we're not seeing the same thing every week.
right.
So we saw a blood and guts match. Now we're seeing a barbed wire match. They're struggling, and I don't know how they're going to back themselves out of that corner. You know, when is enough?
And I know, was it last year? I think that it was Vince that stated somehow that, or people were speculating that Vince knew that the product was stale, but he was happy with how the product was. And I know this, I will tell you this, and exactly why he does not care whether it's stale. He knows it's stale and what if he's happy. It's all about the merchandising. WWE has become one of those global companies similar to, say, Apple or Coca-Cola, McDonald's, that everybody knows. You know what I mean? So he's making money regardless. He's making money over merchandise, TV deals, the Peacock deal, the Saudi deals. He does not give a shit what actually comes out. As long as those seats are filled and people are buying tickets and people are buying merchandise, that's it.
I agree. You know, it's all about the money, man. John Cena was the top guy selling the merchandise, you know, and have Roman now. You had Bray Wyatt. List goes on and on. You know, Vince is making his money. Why should he care?
Exactly. But now, seeing that Vince got him in a little bit of trouble, things could change. You know, we've discussed this a few times on this podcast. We've been kind of keeping a close eye on it. We do, 3-4 episodes a week. So we discuss it at least once a week. So we've been talking about it. What is your opinion? What do you think is going to happen with Vince?
I actually spoke about this in my podcast a few episodes ago. I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. Am I surprised that it did happen? Am I surprised he's in trouble? No, he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
But all these women are coming forward now and saying he did this, he did that. And there's like new information each week.
Yeah.
More women stepping forward. So this isn't looking good.
No.
As for, what's going to happen with WWE, it's rumored Stephanie McMahon is taking control. Who knows? But I don't know.
My thing is with Stephanie in control for the she's the current CEO, right? Or CEO, whatever Vince's position officially was. That does not mean much with her in there because basically Vince is still in charge in a way because all she has to do, he's a phone call away and he's going to still, obviously he's still going to be head of creative, etc. But do you think that he could be telling her what to do, how this is going to go, and this is how you're going to do it? So it's not, in my personal opinion, it's not official until he's like really out of there.
I believe it, man. If you don't like it, he'll change it. There was a time when they had Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff running Rollins creatively. And now maybe Vince didn't like what was going on, but they're out of the game. And
personal opinion.
That's two people to put in there, but
I don't think they gave Bischoff enough chance when they brought him back. He was only in there, a month, and they didn't see any change. I'm like, it's not going to take a month to change an entire wrestling product. You know what I mean? It's going to take a lot longer than that. But Heyman was in there longer, and those two guys, Heyman, I'll tell you this. This is my what I got to say. Heyman is one of the greatest minds for professional wrestling as far as doing the whole less is more. What did Bischoff have to do? He just had to spend a billionaire's money to bring in big, lots of talent, and he had a whole booking committee. So there's two different spectrums here. So it didn't work. It didn't work that way when he was brought in as a head of creative for SmackDown.
Yeah, I mean, like they didn't give Bischoff a chance at all. Man. They took him out of there, and I think even he was starstruck about it because I think he gave a couple comments about it, but I don't know what they expected.
Yeah,
they can't just have Bischoff change their product. The problem with WWE is they want to hire all these Hollywood writers that don't really care about the product, or even I don't even think they watch it, to be honest.
Well, that's been proven. I guess there was one that was a former stand-up comedy writer, or a stand-up comedian, rather, who basically was a guest on some podcast. She couldn't even get Bobby Lashley's name right.
Yeah, and Bobby Ashley, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and she got fired within like 48 hours of that podcast being posted. So for not knowing she basically embarrassed the company. So
I don't know, man. Now I think they got Bruce Pritchard in there, I believe.
I believe Bruce is in there. Bruce is always, anytime he's with the company, he's been the right-hand man for Vince. So, he'll be helping out quite a bit. Personal opinion that what do you think about do you think that Hunter will have any kind of influence or get into that position at all?
I was thinking that. I was thinking he might, being that Stephanie is rumored to take charge. But like you said, Vince is a phone call away. It could be the same with Triple H. And if you don't like what Triple H has to do, he can just change it. I would hope that Triple H would have some creative freedom, being that he is the one that kind of brought NXT to where it was.
Yeah.
Now, if he could have some creative freedom with Raw and SmackDown, we could maybe see some changes. But like you said, Vince is always going to be in control, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that he hasn't in the last 20 years. When he bought WCW it was good for about a year. Professional wrestling. It ended up being a very dark period for professional wrestling because there was no competition. Everything got stale. That Ruthless Aggression era, I guess, is quite a popular era, but wrestling suffered and struggled for many years. I mean, right now it's not necessarily struggling. I think WWE, they're not really struggling financially or any of that business. They're making tons of money. Creatively, excuse me, they're suffering. And it's just a drag to watch. So, and who watches on Monday nights really? Who watches? Mostly people that have been watching it for 30 years. They're used to tuning into Monday Night Raw because that's all they've been doing every Monday night since the show's aired.
Yeah, it's like a Saturday Night Live.
Exactly.
You get this stuff every week, the same fans tuning in. I don't know, man. It's like daytime television. It's like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or whatever.
Yeah. It's just the same thing over and over. Things could change. It could get better when if Vince decides to retire or whatnot, or if he gets taken completely away. It could get better. Things could change. I mean, they could bring somebody in that can actually end up being worse. Who the hell knows? But they need fresh. They need to stop with the creative writers, the Hollywood writers. Personally, they don't know professional wrestling because they're just trying to appeal to all different audiences, not necessarily a professional wrestling audience. They've proven time.
Go ahead. Sorry.
They've proven time and time again they are just an entertainment company.
Yeah, they need to bring in people that watch the product.
Yes.
Some people might say, and I might be crazy for saying it, but bring in Jim Cornette, bring in Bischoff.
Yeah.
You've seen the way he was with WCW.
Yeah.
Bring in don't bring in Vince Russo. If you say it can get any worse, bring Vince Russo. But
well, I got to say something about that because they're talking about how they're going to be going to the TV-14, the immature, they're going back to that. And my first thought was, everybody thinks it's going to get better automatically. My thing is, It's not the rating that's gonna do that. It's the creativity. Excuse me. I'm having trouble saying that word tonight. It's your creativity. You could make a fantastic wrestling show on a PG rating. The Attitude Era does not hold up. If you go back and watch it, a lot of it is straight hot garbage. So there's very little that's like really holds up and says, damn, that's really freaking good. Very little. It was just shocking, and that's why people tuned in. But if one of the opinions, I'm sorry, I'll let you say in 1 second. One of the things that I thought of when they said that they're going to be changing their rating, I'm just like, oh God, how are they going to do that? They don't have anybody to write like that. My first thought was they're going to fucking bring Vince Russo back.
And if they do, they might as well kiss their company goodbye, because you've seen what he did with TNA Impact.
Well, they can't give him that much creativity. I mean, I
would hope not.
Because he had a lot of creativity in WWE, but Vince was the filter. They had to filter out a lot. Now, the thing with that and the difference in WCW is he went into WCW and talked himself up, got a huge pay raise going into WCW. They gave him money basically stating that he did all this stuff, not saying that he had some sort of filter, obviously. So he went in there, they gave him full creative control and destroyed the company. And then he made TNA look terrible too. So
yeah, and it's a shame because Impact Wrestling was really good back in the day.
And they've gone through phases. I think the early days were really good. They had a lot of really, really great years. Then they struggled a lot. I stopped watching it in 2010 after the 10-10-10 episode. If you remember that at all.
Yeah, that was Jeff Hardy's heel turn, I believe, right?
I don't know. I shut it off after the first hour. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you. I said this on this podcast before, but it's 10-10-10. They kept hyping up that there's going to be this big change, October 10th, 2010. It comes finally after weeks and weeks and weeks of advertising it, and it's just Hogan and Bischoff standing in a ring for a full hour. Not one match from that full hour. They're just cutting this long-ass promo, no commercial breaks, nothing. I just shut the TV off, and I didn't watch Impact for another 8 years. I ended up tuning in to Slammiversary 2018, and that's what got me back interested in Impact.
You know, a lot of people say Impact is better nowadays. I haven't watched Impact Wrestling probably maybe myself.
No, it's really good right now. They have a really good roster. They're doing some really good stuff. It's a lot of that behind the scenes, backstage segments that are a lot of times hot garbage. So it truly is.
I would hope it was, at one point it was good, even when their backs were up against the wall, man, they kind of dug themselves out a little bit when they had the Hardys. They had Matt Hardy with his broken gimmick. That was pretty cool. That kind of had people talk about TNA a little more. And then Anthem bought them out. So then the Hardys had all these guys leaving TNA at once. And then they were back just being garbage again. So now it's good to see them, kind of do better.
It's a fun show to watch now. It really is. Are they ever going to get to the glory days, like when they were packing those, arenas or whatever like that for the tapings and stuff? Probably not. Seems like they're really doing smaller venues. When I saw them, I went to this Bound for Glory 2018, and it was in a nightclub, like a dance club, basically. And it was like, that was the extent of it. And they fit probably, 600 to 800 people in there. It was a really tight, packed place. Yeah.
And it never seemed like they had a lot of an audience, a lot of live events, But like you said, they probably won't be back to their glory days. Even if they brought back the 6-sided ring, I don't think they'd ever, do what they can do then. But
I guess only time can tell. They don't really spend a lot on production either, it seems, these days. It's just they always have some sort of technical difficulties as well. So it ends up being a pretty good show overall. I'm glad that they're doing a lot of really good things with Moose. Sami Callihan's back. A lot of the Ring of Honor guys went there, like OGK and stuff. Matt Taven and Eddie Edwards is killing it over there. It turned into a really, really good show.
Yeah, Eddie Edwards has been around for a while, same as Moose. I remember when he first came to Impact. And it's cool with what AEW is doing with this crossover with Impact. You know, we get to see a lot of Impact guys on AEW, a lot of AEW guys on Impact. So I think that helps Impact out a lot more.
Yeah.
Now from years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have anything else you want to discuss tonight?
I don't know. Not really.
Not really. All right, then I guess we go ahead.
I think we covered everything, but
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do this again. So I'm looking forward to that if you ever want to come back. Why don't you tell everybody where you could be found?
I can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Anchor. I believe it's called Breaker. I can be found on there, Google Podcast, anywhere you stream your podcast. Check out Wrestling World. I'll be doing a boxing episode next week. I'll be covering Jake Paul. Controversial topic, but we'll see where it goes.
You have any, what about social media?
Social media, find me on Twitter at Austin Boyer25. You can find me on Facebook. Name's Austin Boyer. But yeah, I'm on social media. I don't do Instagram. I guess I'm too old for that. I don't know.
You got to follow our page on Instagram. It's all wrestling stuff. So go ahead, PWZ Network. Everybody, I want to thank you for listening. Austin, I'm thanking you. This was a great show. Love to have you back. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night as well. Have a good night, everybody.
Sir, thanks for having me.